Welcome back to the Cerebral Cricketer podcast. Today we have a very, very special guest on the show today. Bryce Street is an opening batsman, has made his debut for Queensland in the Sheffield Shield in 2019 and won the title in 2020 season, 2021-2020 season. He has also represented Australia A and holds a record for one of the highest scores in Australia domestic second 11 history, with a record-breaking 345 of 430 for Queensland second 11 in 2019. So let's get straight into it. So thank you for coming on the show, Bryce.
No, thank you for having me. I look forward to chatting about all things the mental side of the game and cricket.
Perfect. So yeah, as you already know, like the whole vibe of the show is to kind of pick the brains, the mental side of things of cricketers. I think in terms of content, it's not as prevalent in those circles. I think it's like picking up in the last few years, like with Shane Watson stuff and all that. So that's kind of where I got that inspiration from. So I think the whole idea is to also just get an idea of your upbringing, how you saw cricket, and sort of get a more of an understanding what it takes to play at a high level. So as a kid, did you always play cricket, or did you play other sports as well? And at a young age, did you dream of being a cricketer as a profession?
Yeah, I did. I played lots of other sports when I was younger. Like I was given the chance to go out and play as many as I wanted to, but I guess cricket was the only one that I truly enjoyed playing and truly wanted to be good at. The rest of them were just a bit of fun to break things up, I guess. And then like once I got to 12, 13, 14, I pretty much just streamlined myself and I guess stopped worrying about the other sports and just started focusing on that when I wanted to start taking it seriously and being like, right, well, if I want to make a career out of this in the future, this is probably what I've got to do from now.
And what just other sports did you have to give up?
I wouldn't see yeah, I guess it is give up in this sense, but to me, it was just like, oh, well, this is not what I want to do. So I just like, oh, well, I'm not really that fussed if I don't play anyway. I guess through high school and primary school, cross country running, athletics, touch footy. What else was there? I picked up basketball later in life when I was about 18 or 19, but then that's just ankles and knees everywhere. So that got thrown to the side pretty quickly. And then I guess that was about really the only sports that I played in a social setting. So yeah, those ones.
And you said something interesting where you said, you sort of have to give up those sports if you really want to sort of make it to that next level. What age did you already have this thought process?
I mean, I could look back through my childhood photo albums and there's photos of me at 8 years old saying that I want to play cricket for Australia. I mean, every kid does at that age. But I guess it was like once I sat down and I just started coming through the junior pathway system at Queensland Cricket. And it was like, right, well, if I'm going to be on this pathway and want to take this seriously, that's kind of where I need to start streamlining myself and put my hours into practicing and getting better at this.
Yeah, fair enough. And what I've noticed when I was going through, scorecards when you're like 14, 15, 16 years of age, you always seem to be opening the batting. So was that something that you always wanted to do as a young kid, like opening the batting, or were you inspired by, I don't know, certain Australian cricketer that made you want to open the batting?
Um, I think when I first started opening, it was more because no one wanted to do it. Like that was it's kind of the way it always is. And then I guess once I got older, I also kind of realized that I never had to wait to bat. I was always pretty keen to get going and go out and actually get started. So the easiest place to do that is to open the batting. So no one else gets to bat in front of you and have some fun before you get out there.
So I guess it's a bit of the situation at hand, and then you're sort of nurtured into that
Yeah.
eventually. You sort of grew into, rather than kind of being like, oh, I love, I don't know, Justin Langer growing up with Matthew Hayden, and therefore that's why I want to open the batting.
Yeah, no, I loved Hayden, I loved Langer. I grew up on that kind of team in like the '05 and then the '06 and '07 Ashes. And then but I also loved Hussey as well. So then like I grew up idolizing them, but I never really picked a position out of purely because of a player that I liked. So yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. And one thing I noticed as well, obviously, like you're a left-handed batsman and you bowl right-handed. Um, that's an interesting combination because we see a lot of international cricketers have that, left-handed batting style, but then also bowl right-handed. But then I guess I'd say within, lower leagues or club circles, it's not as common, perhaps. So is that something you naturally sort of, were you natural when it came to becoming a left-handed batsman, or was it something you're coached into? I'm just curious from that end.
I was probably coached into it. My dad, who kind of raised me on cricket and taught me how to play when I was a kid, was a left-handed batter. So he just kind of showed me how to bat on that side of the stick, and I just followed suit. But obviously, I was right-handed, so I was always going to bowl right-handed. But I've always said that like batting left and bowling right is a big, like technically wise, is a huge advantage because your dominant hand is now your top hand, like naturally. So like I'm so much stronger in my top arm than I am in my bottom one, and that allows me, I think, to have a more solid technique, I guess, without like having to overtrain it and having to kind of focus on not having your bottom hand take over the stick. Um, I mean, obviously, as you say, there's a lot of people around international cricket that do it, and I mean, obviously, part coincidence, part just the environment that you come up in. But yeah, I think there's definitely something in that.
Yeah, because I remember going through like whole list of names like comes to mind. I think even Hayden Langer, maybe Adam Gilchrist, even
I
Clark.
see.
Like even though he was right-handed, he still bowled with his left hand. So they all sort of reverse.
Yeah,
A lot of people like that. I think Mike Hussey as well. So like so many players. So it kind of makes me think like, that's why I asked the question because you mentioned your dad sort of coached you into it. Was he aware that, okay, since, I don't know, you're right-handed when you write, therefore I'm going to make him into a left-handed batsman? Did he have that kind of awareness or he just kind of did it because
no,
he was a left-handed batsman?
no, it just kind of happened. It's like I only know how to teach you on this side of the bat, so um, that's just how it's going to be. And like I probably had the chance to try right-handed when I was younger, but lefty was just something that I stuck at. And that was where I spent most of my time, and that was where I got better. So it stayed that way.
And it seems like your dad was probably a cricketer himself and taught you a lot about the game. Was that always the case when you were a kid?
Yeah. No, we spent a lot of time at the nets together, a lot of time watching cricket together, a lot of time just talking about the game in general. I guess he's probably where I learnt most of my, if not my skill set, most of my mental side of the game from, and like my game awareness, game strategy, just talking about it. Because like he was never a world beater, but I would say his knowledge of the game and his general game IQ was pretty good. And that helped make a big difference to me when I was growing up and he was coaching me.
So would you say around 14, 15 years of age, for example, your dad was already refining or helping you through, building that process as a batsman
I
into...
reckon it was earlier. Like I
Oh,
look back at it now. I look back at it now, and I reckon at 11 or 12, like he was already starting to, I guess, plant the seeds of the batting style that I guess I've taken on today and how I play, which obviously is quite young, but I mean, it turned out well in the long run because not a whole lot's changed for me in terms of those processes in the last 15 years.
okay, wow. So can you walk us through some, like, I guess, key tips that you did receive from your dad that you feel that has really made a huge impact in your career?
Um, I think I guess from a young age, it was more of a case of like he always taught me that you don't score 100 in your first 30 balls. Um, and he's like, if you want, like, if you want to do well and you want to succeed, you have to be willing to be out there for a long time. Which obviously, like, when you're a junior cricketer, like, no one really thinks about. So then, like, I was instilled with this, I guess, describe it, more mature mindset than the other people playing around me. And it was like, well, okay, I'm not going to be in a rush, even though the junior format is like, okay, you've only got to face 60 balls this innings, and then you got to retire and come off, then you can come back at the end. So like, even though I guess the success was never there, like sometimes I'd walk off 20 off 60, like to my dad, that was resounding. Like he was really happy with that. And then that allowed me to not feel like I ever had to be in a rush, and I guess was allowed to be nurtured and grown into that kind of style.
So did he? Would you say that he had a strong sense of like positive affirmation into your batting when you were sort of, and if you got out, for example, he didn't have that kind of negative outlook. He was more optimistic in every inning that you did play.
Yes and no, because like you got to also understand that he pushed me hard because he knew how good I was and my potential was. So like, yes, he was ultra hard on me as a cricket coach, but then I also got to have my dad side of him, where like he would always reaffirm, always take his time helping me. So like, I guess being able for him, which is tough, being able to split that personality down the middle, where I never felt like I was fully getting the career coach, but when the time came and the conversation needed to be had, I could have my dad and my coach as well. I guess that made it really easy for me, because like we could have a long, lengthy discussion on a day that I did poorly. We'd finish the conversation and then it'd be back to dad, and then we talk about something else. And like, I never felt like I was being overrun. I never felt like he was always on top of me. Like I understood where the line was, and he made it really clear for me. And as a kid growing up, that made it so much better for me.
I think, yeah, like obviously balance is key naturally, and so you need someone to push you, but at the same time, sort of know when to not push you, and it's a balancing act, especially if you're a kid. Because I feel like personally, I've seen a lot of kids when if they're playing or whatever, and they're really young and they might have talent. They could be. It doesn't necessarily have to be a dad. It could just be any coach. Like sometimes they're a bit too hard, like all the time, like going at 100 at every moment that they're with the child trying to talk about cricket. And I think that's probably detrimental for a kid's confidence at times and all that, because you need to build their confidence too. And sometimes just overcoaching and being overcritical about little nuances in technique can be a bit detrimental. You need to sort of free them up and make them feel positive and let them express themselves at times as well. So
Yeah,
I don't know if you have that kind of similar thought process as well.
I do. But like, I mean, like you look at professional environments around the world and player dynamics, coach relationships, coaching dynamics, where like a lot of our time is spent understanding how we communicate with other people to get the best out of them. Because like everyone takes criticism or feedback differently. Like some people like it straightforward, some people like to be coddled. Like that's just part of like the dynamics that we live in professional sport, right? But then you strip that back and you make it about kids who have literally no idea about their own personality and understand nothing about, like, they're still maturing as people, and then you're trying to do that. It just doesn't work. And like, it's like, I guess it's a learning process for both sides, right? Because like my dad's coaching style changed massively as I was growing up, and how I received information from him changed as I grew up. So then you've got a case of like, it's a constant changing relationship, and it's about both sides of the party learning about how to get the best out of each other. And like, that looks different 12 months, 18 months down the track as it did in the past.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, like if from what you've described, if professional environments are probably a little bit more laid back and relaxed, and probably a lot more aware of each other's personalities and needs and wants, and getting the most out of them, that situation is really important. Then it doesn't make sense to kind of go go at 100 with kids. If you're trying to teach them,
Nah,
so that you've
it's
got to.
crazy.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. So
yeah, like you just, like, at the end of the day, it's a game, right? You've got to let them enjoy it and have fun first, because that's how you keep people in the sport. And that's how, like, their passion for the game is what makes them yearn to be better at it and develop. If you're just going to be hard on them all the time, then they're going to associate that negative feeling and reaction with the sport and just not performing in general. And like, it's a game where your successes are so few and far between that you deal with a lot of failure in this sport. And like, you're just going to push kids away from that if you go too hard at them.
yeah, definitely. Like, it makes so much sense in the way you've articulated. Like, I think, I mean, to give the benefit of the doubt, like the coaches, that might be a little hard, or that, everyone has an upbringing in the sense that they, probably thinking the best of their child and wanting to make sure they do their best by just kind of maybe doesn't come out in the right way, etc. So I guess everyone has those challenges in that regard when it comes to, coaching and not over coaching, and even their own trauma kind of playing out where, they see themselves in their child and want to make sure they sort of live their dreams to the child and all that. So everyone has their own sort of,
Yeah.
mental cognition in regards to that. And so I know that, so for example, I've written here, like in summer of 2012 to 2013, you played for the Sandgate Redcliffe Cricket Club, and you pretty much played them for most of your life, or all your life. And that year, you also played for Queensland in the under 15s National Cricket Championships. And you were opening with Jack Clayton, which I think he plays for Queensland as well.
Yeah, he bats four for our Queensland Bull Shield side now.
Yeah, so I think you guys go way back. So that's pretty crazy to play state level cricket with him when you're playing under 15 with him. And you also had you scored a 50 against New South Wales. So around that time, I'm curious to know about like what was your batting strategy like, because obviously you articulate that your dad was a big part of your cricketing journey as a young cricketer, and you obviously have much more maturity than perhaps others in maybe your age level because of your father and the sort of conversations you've had. So, and I assume like as well, like you're playing for under 15 for Queensland, that's like a big deal. Like, that probably gives you hope and confidence that, you're seeing that you can achieve your dream, which is, playing for your state. So I'm just curious what that season was like, what your thought process was, and how you thought about the situation at that time.
Yeah, see, that's always a carnival that sticks out in my mind because that was a very ironic one for me. Because obviously, as you would have done your research, I got picked for the under 15s Australian side, but I actually had a horrendous tournament with the bat. I actually got picked as a bowler, so my batting really struggled. I guess that was realistically my first taste of what it's like sometimes when you're not being positive at all. I guess I was very nervous about going to a national championships and wanting to perform. I knew there was a Australian team to be selected for based on performances throughout the carnival, and I probably put too much pressure on myself when I was batting and was probably too scared to get out. And then the results didn't come. I don't think I got a score above 25 in the first four games. And then on the last day, it was like, well, I just didn't feel like I could make the team anymore. So I kind of let the shackles go a little bit and batted with a bit more freedom, and then managed to score 50 and then somehow got myself picked as an all-rounder. So I just think like that really showed me, I guess it was good building blocks for the future where like we in professional sport now, like you have all these external pressures of performance and winning games and whatnot, but like learning to deal with them at a younger age, and I guess understanding that really helped me down the track because I got to learn about how best I dealt with that really quickly. And then it wasn't like I was just stepping into the Queensland cricket environment on a contract, having no idea how I was going to deal with that as a batter and as a cricketer.
So that's really interesting insights in regards to your nervousness and dealing with that age. It sort of reminded me of when I was doing your research, and I read an article where you talked about your experience in the Netherlands. So like
Yes, yeah,
bit of a correlation. That's why I'm kind of bringing it up. I know the timeline probably doesn't match, but do you feel so? I might just kind of say it in summary so for the listeners they
yeah,
understand what situation I'm talking about. So you joined the Hague Cricket Club in the Netherlands, and it was a challenging adjustment because you're away from family, training alone, little coaching support. So that's definitely very daunting for anyone, and that probably made you feel alone and having to sort of assess things by yourself, all that kind of stuff. And you had that pressure to kind of prove yourself, obviously, because player coming from Australia. And then later on, I think a teammate reassured you, saying that the team believed in him, just wanted him to enjoy his cricket and not chase stats. and then that sort of you mentioned they freed you from that kind of pressure to perform, and then you ended up averaging 50 in the last 10 to 12 games. So I guess the key lesson from that is, the importance of mental freedom and not overthinking too much, because that can be sometimes that can hinder success. So what you just described in the under 15, in the nationals, feeling nervous and this and that. Would you say there's a kind of correlation there in those two scenarios?
Oh, of course. I'm a very nervous person in general, and especially around cricket. And I think it's the wanting to do well that makes me nervous all the time. So I just it just kind of comes with the sport for me at this point, and I've learned a lot of techniques and how to deal with that, and a lot of mindset work, and a lot of understanding. The more I've understood myself as a person, the better it's gotten. But yeah, I guess that those 2 4 month stints in the Netherlands really opened my eyes to, I guess, not only like me dealing with my nerves, but then like me dealing with the perception of other people, where it was like the first 8 games of that season, I spent more time worrying about trying to impress them and make them think that I was a good cricketer than I was about actually trying to score runs.
Yeah.
So once, and I'm like, I mean, I was lucky, right? Because like, I was young, I was my first time away from home. It was all a bit overwhelming. It got the better of me, and I guess what blessed me was the fact that my mental breakdown came in front of the team. And I guess that really showed them my true colors. And I guess how I'd been behaving for the last 2 months was like, nah, this is a lie. This is what the real guy's like. And then once they got to see that, they were like, mate, just play cricket, just have fun. You're a 20-year-old in a foreign country, just enjoy yourself. And I was like, oh, well, shit, okay, geez. I've spent this whole time trying to like convince them of something that they didn't need convincing. And like, I just wasn't getting the best out of myself.
Thank you for those insights. I mean, I think ultimately, everyone is human, and it's about how you deal with it. And obviously, the way you're articulating the situation, what you're going through, shows that you obviously have that level of self awareness to understand what's happening. And you just mentioned that you have strategies now to, work around that and all that. So I'm just curious, like, how did you sort of develop that self awareness? Does it stem from I guess the coaching that you received from your dad when you talked about cricket with your dad, or was it something that maybe happened even later, that maybe it was triggered by, I don't know, the situation with the under 15 championships that you talked about, and maybe went on that journey of kind of, because this is, at the end of the day, it's not like cricket, like as in these things don't, you can't develop it if you just go to the nets all the time. So I'm just curious, like what that, how that journey looked like when it comes to the mental side, and how you learned, and what sort of strategies have you developed?
I guess that the kind of dealing with all of that really changed when I first came onto contract, and I kind of had my first ever access to a sports psychologist. And like, obviously, it's like, he's gone to a sports psych. Oh, he's got head noise. That's kind of, it's a stigma that comes with it, right? Like when you've never been to one before. But I was like, oh yeah, first year on contract, I was like, I want to talk to this guy because I want to see what he's got to offer. And honestly, I could not have been happier about like what transpired after that, because the help that I got, and it's like, it was silly little things that like he was talking about that I was like, oh my God, he makes such a fantastic point. So like a perfect example, right? And I love telling this one to people because it cracks them up. So I was a very routine based person when I was younger, right? Like if I had success doing something, like I would go back and I would just try and repeat that process, like what I was doing the day before, what I would eat for dinner, because routines like create mental stability, right? But there's also a problem that if you become too reliant on them, then you become like so dependent on the routine for success that you actually make it worse for yourself. So what he was talking about, so he was like, oh, like, so you drive from Queensland cricket back to home, right? And he's like, I was like, yeah. He's like, how many ways do you drive home? It's like, one. He's like, right, you drive the same way home from work every day. He's like, would you call that a overextensive routine? Yeah, I would. He's like, okay, I want you to figure out a new path from work to home every day on the fly, no maps, no navigation. And I was like, what? Why? And then all of a sudden, like, I remember I was like, oh, gee, I'll try it. Anyway, I've just driven down some random side street, had no idea where I was. And I was like, I could literally feel myself like panicking in the car. And I was like, oh my God, like, this is actually what, like, there's some merit in this. And I was like, hang on a sec. I know where my home is. I know what direction I need to go. All I got to do is remain calm and just kind of follow the roads roughly there, and it works. And like, after a couple of weeks, I had it down pat where I could just take a random turn, throw myself into some chaos, and then I'd be like, right, how do I get home from here? And subjecting my brain to that and not being just in these set routines and understanding how to deal with that made such a huge difference to my career game. Because when things didn't go to plan, like the day before, the night before, the morning of, didn't matter anymore. And I was able to understand what mental space I needed to be in to perform and what things mattered that actually mattered. Sorry, what things actually mattered to get me into that space. And then like there was a heap of other stuff that we did, like meditation, breathing, visualization. They were all more things that were skill based, but it was about being able to rip apart some routines and unhealthy routines that I had created and then strip it back and say, right, well, what's actually important out of this? What's going to be required to get me into a position where I'm mentally in a good spot to play sport?
Those were amazing insights. Thank you for sharing that story as well. Because yeah, as like what I take from it is, as you mentioned, that if you're too reliant on that sort of set structure, like anything sort of comes your way, and life is like unexpected, right? Things happen and you don't expect it. The night of something crazy could happen before a game, and you don't even realize. Like you can't just let those situations dictate your performances. You just got
Yeah.
to find ways mentally to park it to the side. And obviously, not every day is going to be easy. Some will be hard, some will be easy, but you just kind of find a way. As you mentioned, like, if you're not using Google Maps and trying to find your way, like you'll find your way, it's always going to be A to B, it could be different ways, but, you just got to kind of figure it out and have that self-belief as well. I think that kind of underpins it to some extent. But also, like what you mentioned, that you had access to a sports psychologist. Was that at 15, 16 years of age, was it?
Nah, that would have been my first year on contract when I was 18 years old.
18. So it goes to show like how important that kind of knowledge is. Because I think I would say like maybe a decade or two ago, these kind of conversations were pretty, weren't even, around at that time. It's only probably in the recent past where people are really, like, even on club cricket level or lower league level, like they're starting to understand like what it means when you talk about the mental side of the game and all these sort of processes. So I think, yeah, like having access to that at that age is like huge as well. I would assume, right? And that
Yeah.
sort of knowledge you pass around to everyone that you can as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in hindsight, I wish I had access to one younger, like, because like I'd played so much cricket up to that point, and I still had no idea about my own mental health and my sporting mental health. And like, it made a huge difference to me later on. But if I'd known if I'd known about this stuff earlier, like, I mean, not that it's this, you reach the same target at the end of the day, but it would have been healthier for me to have that earlier in my life.
Yeah, and as well, like, so because you're saying it now, even though you've scored all those runs at like that, 16 years of age, 15 years of age, what would you say was your success then without having this kind of knowledge at that young age? What would you kind of put it down to? Just a skill level base? Would it be that? Like, just
I
a
think
skill
it, I think it was a discipline thing. Honestly, like I was never super talented. Like obviously, my output of runs was like high at a young age, but I would never say that that was because I was ultra talented at the game. I just always felt like I was mentally more refined than people my age. Um, and I just always remember like looking at people like on scorecards that would get to like 30 or 40 and get out, or 50 and 60 and get out. And just the number of instances where that happened to me were just very minimal. Like once I actually got set and got going, like I had the mental toughness at that age to really like bat for a long time. And that was a skill that I'd obviously refined from a young age. And that was kind of be like, right, well, this is your point of strength. This is what you can go to when times are tough. Like when you're not hitting the ball well, when you're not striking them cleanly, like you can grit it out. That's what you're good at. And like, yeah, like I failed a lot at that age as well. But also like when I got myself to 30 or 40, I was like, right, here we go. Okay. And it was never getting ahead of myself. It was never thinking about 100 early on. It was just one ball at a time, ball by ball, same plan, always consistent. And then that helped me to create big scores.
That's amazing. So you basically refined that aspect of your game and coupled that with, I guess, the knowledge of the mental skills later on that kind of help that go hand in hand,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah. Because I guess the mental battle of batting and nerves in terms of what I struggle with is about me getting through my first 30 balls, 40 balls. Because like once you get to that and you're comfortable, then you're not dealing with the nerves, you're not dealing with the mindset issues. Like you're already there and you're already going, you're up and running. Then it's just putting it into autopilot. You know what your plans are and you're good to go. But it was then about, okay, how do I give myself the best chance of going from 0 off 0 facing the first ball of the game to being there after 30 or 40 balls still and giving myself a chance to have a score.
And so, what other strategies have you, would you say, incorporated as a result of having access to that sports psychologist that you've implemented to your batting process?
Um, Definitely being able to control my breathing better. Like it sounds a bit silly because we always talk about like meditation and mindfulness, but I guess it's common knowledge now that a lot of our fears and anxieties of not performing well in sport come from thinking about the future. And it's like the classic case of like, oh, okay, if I ask you to not think of an apple, what do you think of? An apple. So, like, being able to kind of remove those negative thoughts from your mindset because you kind of bring them onto yourself if you do think about it. And then just focusing on ball by ball. And, like, if you're consciously thinking about your plans in between deliveries, that's just going to help you executing because the more you positively reinforce that in your brain and saying it, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to do. Like the decision making period itself when you're actually facing the ball is so minimal that it's just muscle memory trained. So if you're feeding your brain the information that you want between balls, that way when you're actually facing up, you're not having to think about it, you're just doing it. Because I think that's always looking at it now, like at 20, at 27, like that's the biggest battle, what you're doing with yourself in between deliveries. Because like to actually score 100 right realistically in red ball cricket, you've got to bat for, let's say, minimum 2 sessions. So you're out there for 4 hours. And like the actual time that you spend mentally switched on facing a delivery is maybe, I don't know, say you're facing 180 balls in 2 sessions. That's about 10 seconds a ball, 1800, 30 minutes. So you got 3.5 hours of downtime where you have to either A, stop your brain from wandering, or B, stop your brain from getting ahead of itself, both of which are quite difficult. So being able to get on top of that and use that time, those 3.5 hours, to, I guess, reinforce things, think positively, and set yourself up for the long haul for when you're actually in those 30 minutes of intense batting time so that you're not having to forcefully make decisions as the ball's coming at you.
So, are you implementing the breath work in between deliveries in that downtime that you described?
Um, if I feel particularly nervous about it, yes. Like I only do it to kind of control my brain and control my heartbeat and I guess my nerves that come around that. So like I don't want to overdo it because like I guess doing it for the sake of doing it isn't achieving much if there's nothing for it to combat. Like if I'm feeling calm and comfortable, then I'm not going to really be worried about that. I'll just focus on my processes. But if I feel like I'm in a place where I actually can't think about my processes because I'm nervous or I'm itchy or I'm edgy, then I've got to reel it back a layer and go, right, I need to get myself in a better space here. I need to chill out. I need to calm down. Let's just take a couple of deep breaths, focus on that. And then you come out of that and say, okay, right, now I feel like I'm in a better space to get this right.
essentially it's assessing the situation, what you need. So I guess the stimuli might be different, obviously, and just kind of tailoring what you need to get the best output, as you know, depending on the situation at hand.
Yeah.
And so what, also specifically about the breath work you're talking about, like what exactly do you do, just out of curiosity?
So I'll try and so if I'm not batting, if it's before I'm batting, I always have a thing where I basically try and touch my thumb to each of my fingers. So I'm actively having to do a physical motion because that then takes up enough of my thought power that I can't normally think about much else. So by distracting my brain, I'm able to get it into kind of a neutral zone. I can focus on my breathing. I can focus on the sensation of breathing, which is then also removing my brain from doing other things. So then it's not really about actively thinking about something. It's just trying to create like a vacuum. So I can suck everything out negative that I don't want in there. And then once I have control of that, I can think about it. And I can start planting thoughts of what I actually want to do in there.
Okay, yeah, thank you for those insights. And on top of that, you mentioned meditation and visualization. So I want to delve into that a little bit as well. So I'd say that from what I know, meditation pretty much go hand in hand with breath work to an extent. And I assume that that meditation will be done maybe in the morning or any other time in the day. And how regularly do you meditate?
Um, Meditation normally comes and like people are going to think like roll down like a mat, lie down on it or something. Honestly, like for me, it's never been that deep. Like obviously for some people that works and that helps, but I never felt the need to go to that length to get it right. So normally I could just sit on the couch, close my eyes for maybe 5 minutes, get myself into that vacuum space that I talk about. And then I'm just basically right, like what bowlers am I facing tomorrow? What's that going to look like for me? Where are they going to challenge me? How are they going to try and get me out? Where do I feel like I can score off them? And then I'm kind of wanting to create that picture in my brain of the answering those 5 questions by creating those scenarios in my mind. And like most of the time, it's the most boring 5 minutes ever. Like most of it is just defending and leaving and maybe a couple of shots because like all I want at the end of the day is to feel like I'm finding ways to be able to nullify how they're going to get me out and I can capitalize on where I think they'll miss to give me opportunities to score.
So that meditation you described is pretty much visualization. They
Yeah.
essentially this one of
Yeah.
the same in the way you do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. The meditation is kind of just used to help me get into the space where I can start visualizing my visualization properly. So like it's normally only getting myself there takes maybe I mean if you're having a nervy day maybe 2 or 3 minutes, but normally I can get myself I feel like into that space in maybe a minute or less when I'm actively thinking about it and sitting down focused.
Do you couple that with watching a lot of footage of the bowlers that you expect to face the next day? Do they go hand?
Yes and no. So like obviously like footage is valuable because it's like it gives you like obviously our sight is our biggest strength. So being able to absorb information through sight is obviously the most easiest way to learn it and the fastest sometimes. But also I don't like overdoing it because sometimes I feel like I can over fry my brain with information. At the end of the day, I just want to keep it simple. So half of my watching footage is more just understanding what bowlers' actions look like, what variations do they have. That way, like I'm able to basically set up my routines, understanding that, right, this is exactly how he's going to run in at me. This is what he's bowling. He's holding it this way. It means that. And I can try and make plans accordingly rather than feeling like I'm having to play guesswork when he's running in, guessing what he's trying to bowl.
Yeah, so I think that those mental cues will just help you to plan a little bit better, or be a little bit more prepared than I
Yeah.
guess the average person that doesn't have access to that footage as well. So obviously that would be important. I also want to touch on maybe the summer of 2014, 2015.
Yep.
That season where you played both the under 17 and the under 19 state tournaments. I think you were 17 or 18 years old, or 17 years old at this time. And on top of that, you're already playing. So I think at 17 years of age, playing second grade, and also moved to first grade in that
Yep.
same season. And you did score a debut 122 for the first. So obviously at that young age, you're playing against people a lot older who've probably played 20 years, 30 years, whatever it is. So what was your experience like? What was going through your head as a young kid playing at that level? At one moment you're playing a state tournament like with players against your who are your age, and then you're playing another sort of competition where it's like a lot older people.
Yeah, I mean, look, it was like I never felt like I had a lot of ultra success that year, but that really that probably shaped me into like the batter that I was today, because that was where I got my real first taste of what really good cricketers were like. Like obviously, I played a lot of men's cricket when I was younger, but obviously, like it's still lower grade stuff. So like you get your medal tested by men, like mentally, like that's where you got to be better. But like at the end of the day, like they're still third or fourth grade cricketers. They're not first grade quality, under 19 state quality, or semi pro quality. So then I had a lot happen that year. I had my webbing split in a game at a slips catch, went straight through, blew it open, blood everywhere, hospital stitches. That was like 4 weeks before the 17s carnival. So I couldn't hold a bat up until like 2 or 3 days before that. And then I felt like I might as well have been holding a broomstick for most of that carnival. Like batting just didn't feel natural, didn't feel nice. Everything felt really forced. I didn't have a great carnival. I think I averaged like 20. So obviously disappointing, but I guess that's what happens when you're still maturing as a cricketer and you have an extended period of absence. So as someone who hit a lot of balls when they were younger, when I didn't get that opportunity for a month, a lot of memories and muscle memories and habits changed. So then went back. I managed to luckily be selected for the 19s before the 17s started. I still say to this day, if it had been picked after, I was no chance. But got picked for the 19s, had a month and a half to go away and work and get better. Felt like I did, had some reasonable success at that tournament for someone who I think was 2 years younger. But that was also really the eye-opening part for me. So that was, I guess, we went against some really good sides. And like I remember facing the New South Wales attack, which had like Liam Hatcher and Henry Thornton in it. And they were bowling, like for me, a little 17-year-old, rapid. And I was like, ooh, okay. Like, I don't feel like I've got time for this. I feel very rushed. Like I don't feel like I'm confident or comfortable. And then I kind of went away after that, and I sat down with Dad, and we started talking about my batting. And he's like, "Oh, like I just feel like you were very rushed." And I was like, "Yeah, I definitely agree about that." He's like, "Oh, what are your thoughts on a pre-movement, like to get you into a better base position, so you have to do less moving once the ball's released?" And honestly, never had a pre-movement in my life, and I was like, "Yeah, sure. Look, we can try it." So I went down the nets, had a couple of hits, tried a few things, felt like, oh yeah, this seems like it's going to work. We'll give this a crack. And at this point, I'd played a couple of first grade games already. I'd had some success. I think my best score at the time was like 40 not out. And then a week after I got back from 19, so I just turned 17, I think. And we're playing against Souths. And Souths at the time was one of the strongest bowling attacks in the comp. So they had Ben Cutting, Mark Steckety, and another guy who was a very good first grader at the time, never played state cricket, but took hundreds of first grade wickets. And I remember like I walked out at like 4 for 70, and it was the first time that I'd properly used my trigger in a game. And I was like, oh, this is game changing. Like all of a sudden I felt like I was moving so much easier into the ball. I didn't feel rushed. My most visual memory of that innings was Ben Cutting came back for, I think it was his second spell. And like, obviously I'm a little 17-year-old batting down there. I think he felt a bit, what's the term, easygoing on me, because the first ball was nice and full and then it got driven back past him for 4. And then I didn't get one in my half for another 3 overs. So that was like, okay, this is the big leagues now. These guys are not going to go easy on me, and these guys are bowling quick. So it was just me ducking and weaving and surviving for my life for the next 3 overs until I got through that and the next bowler came on. And then, but all of a sudden, that trigger started feeling really good. I felt like when guys were missing, I could score. I had good power, even though I was against good pace. And I just felt really confident in my game. And obviously, that ended up being my maiden first grade 100. Um, but I guess the building blocks of what that laid for me for not only for the rest of the season, but the next couple of years was probably the biggest thing of all out of that season, where I was like, right, this is my template from now on. This is how my technique is going to look. And I just need to refine this and work on this.
So, interesting conversation around the trigger movement. So, in your case, you described that it definitely helped you after you're facing the New South Wales bowlers and they felt a little rushed, and you worked on that and it felt natural later on. Whereas, actually, funny story, I spoke to, because I'm based in Melbourne. I lived in Sydney my whole life, so I moved not too long ago. And Jake Fraser-McGurk actually came to my suburb for some opening of a field that got some investment from the state government.
Yep.
And I had an opportunity to talk to him, talk to him about trigger movement, and he tells me he's never had a trigger movement in his life. So it made me think like, that whole conversation around trigger movement is interesting because obviously some people, like right now you're describing for yourself, it actually helped you get to the ball earlier. As opposed to obviously someone like Fraser McGurk, he's saying that, he's obviously facing quicker bowlers too and doesn't have a trigger movement. So I guess as a youngster, when they see all that, they're a little, I guess, confused as to what to do, what not to do. So what would your advice be?
I think it's just everyone's individual, right? And like you look at someone like a Jake Fraser McGurk, who I think is one of the most talented cricketers pound for pound in our country and has the ability to hit the ball absolutely miles in any direction, pretty much 360 around the ground. And like I think it's also relative to the person because like I look at him bat and the positions that he gets into when he just bats normally with no trigger. And that's the position that I'm trying to recreate with my trigger. So I guess at the end of the day, like everyone talks about the optimal batting position where your hands are unweighted at point of release, your momentum slightly moving forward, your weight is evenly distributed so you can move forward or backward, and being able to put yourself in a position to hit the ball anywhere around the ground at point of release so you can make the best decisions possible. What that looks like for people to get there is obviously so individual and so different. Some people want a big trigger. Some people like standing still. Some people like having motion because it makes them feel like they move better. Some people feel like standing still allows them to move sharper and faster. So at the end of the day, it's a learning experience, right? And I might have tried a trigger and it might have not worked at all. So like at the end of the day, the experiment worked for me, but unless you try these things, you'll never know. So I guess at the end of the day, when you're young, you just got to try stuff. Like, yeah, it's not going to work sometimes. Yeah, it's going to feel horrendous. But if you never try it, you never know the answer. And you don't know. Sometimes you can unlock what works best for you by trying things that don't work. And like if there's learnings or takeaways out of that, then you have the ability to add that to the next thing that you try and the next thing that you try. And then all of a sudden you might just find something that clicks. And it's because you tried 3 other things first and you went, oh, actually, no, this doesn't work. I need this. This doesn't work. I need this. Okay, I need that. And then you get it right.
Yeah, and I think essentially that self awareness is key, as you were describing, right? Like you mentioned that you're trying to get into the position that maybe Fraser McGurk might get into, or probably naturally just standing up straight. So obviously, like someone like Rishabh Pant might have a kind of different kind of eye as to someone else. So you just got to know like what works for you, what doesn't, what they need. Like he probably doesn't need a bigger trigger movement. It's kind of taking away from his stillness at the crease. So like it could be many different reasons, right? And but I think as you mentioned, like the key fundamentals stay the same. Like trying to see obviously the ball early, trying to be in the right positions from a balance perspective. So as long as you're kind of covering those bases, I guess it doesn't really matter how technically or otherwise what you kind of do to get there. It's just about figuring out what's best for yourself.
Yeah. And I think like the perfect example of that, and I always talk about this when I talk about the coaching that I do in terms of youngsters. You look at someone like a Steve Smith in the 2019 Ashes, right? Where like it was a one-step trigger. His hands are going to point. His bat's pointing somewhere in the offside. Like it looks so unorthodox, right? But then if I freeze frame it at the point of release, all of a sudden it all looks perfect. Like his bat's unweighted, his head's moving towards the ball, his front foot is ready to go. He can push back into the ball if he needs to. So all of a sudden now you're talking about like, yeah, like he does all these things, but that's because individually it helps him get into the best position that he wants. And like they like at the end of the day, like that breakdown of position at point of release realistically is the only important part of technique. And then obviously your point of contact from there onwards. But like if at point of release you're getting yourself in a position where you can do X, Y, and Z, then whatever you're doing is working.
And my just random question, but because the more common trigger movements, like from what I observed with Yawn, is more like back and across. But I think there are other types of triggers. Like, would a front foot trigger, for example, work at a domestic level, irrespective of the pace that you're facing?
I think if you get it right, because I've tried it. Like I've twitter around my trigger for ages. I try a few things every year. I try a few different things, and like I remember it was the last game of the year. I hadn't had any great form whatsoever through that season. It felt like I was just struggling a little bit. It felt a little bit flat on my feet, and I just felt like I wasn't getting into the right positions. And I was like, right, I'm just going to try this front foot trigger. I'm just going to try throwing myself at the bowler, getting my hands up nice and high, and feeling like I'm going at them. And I guess my biggest concern was like the short ball, because like you're throwing yourself at the bowler. If they throw one into the halfway down, like are you going to be able to get yourself out of the way? But what I kind of learned during that process of trying it out was what I learned in that was like by actually throwing my weight forward and my hands up, I was able to push myself back faster to get onto the back foot and score. So I didn't actually have that much to be worried about. And I tried it in the last game of the Shield season. I think I got 40 and 100 not. So it actually ended up working really well. And then I took the learnings out of that into the preseason of next year and started integrating them into my technique of what I learned. And like obviously things changed again in the future when I felt things weren't quite clicking, but I like it's just there's always taking aways and learnings of what you've done in the past, because nothing is ever completely negative.
And I have a question in regards to going chronologically onto the summer of 2016, 2017, because that was a big year where you scored 234 of 270 and 184 of 282 in first grade. And on top of that, I think in the under 19 championships, you're playing alongside Nathan McSweeney, Max Bryant, and also playing versing the likes of Cameron Green, Lance Morris at the under 19 championship as well. So, at that age, you're obviously racking up big scores and a lot bigger than, I guess, the previous years. Like you're scoring 100, but here you're scoring, double century or close to it as well. So, what would you say you're doing differently as opposed to the other years?
Um, well, that was my first year on contract. So that was realistically like the success that I had that year came down to the fact that that was the first year that I spent in a professional environment in a full preseason that went for 4 months around professional coaches. And like tapping into their ability to help me and get me better was where I made my leap technically as a batter. Like I'd had the mental game before that, and then like I would just find a way to make it work. That was probably the first season where all of a sudden my technique started massively improving, and I felt like I had more scoring options to add to my game. So then obviously we had the 19s. That was the first year that 19s got switched to fully white ball. So that was a bit of a rude awakening for me as a red ball player. So realistically, I would say that I did struggle down there. I didn't have a great carnival. But yeah, I felt like I was really starting to make leaps and bounds in red ball cricket in terms of being able to put pressure back on bowlers and score.
And on top of that, we're heading into the 2019-2020 season. In the prior season, you actually scored a lot of hundreds for the first team. And it seemed like you gained momentum for the 2019-2020 season, where you scored 345 of 434, Queensland against the Victoria second team. So Obviously, that's a huge innings. You're also part of the Queensland sort of setup then, or thereabouts as well. And walk us through that innings because obviously that's a mammoth total, and you've obviously scored prior seasons. Also, you have a double century under your belt, but this one's like off the charts. So batting for that kind of period, and as well, you scored at a pretty good rate that innings. And on top of that, like you're in the setup, and probably in your thinking, if you score a big one here, then you'll be, hopefully getting a debut for Queensland. So walk us through that period, that situation, and what you did in that innings that made you feel like you were able to score that amount of runs.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I talk about these things. Like, realistically, I think that is probably like the best I've ever batted in my career. Like some of the shots that I played, like that day, I look back, I'm like, damn, like I actually managed to pull that out in a game. Um, so I guess like obviously people look at that and go, damn, like 345 or 430, you were moving at quite the clip. I always fondly chuckle because I remember we bowled first day one, bowled them out like second over of day two and batted till lunch. And I was like 20 off 90. Like I was still going slowly, but then all of a sudden, like once we got through the new ball and the ball got soft and the wickets that are doing less, like it felt like the game just really opened up for me. And now I had all these like brand new shiny toys shots that I could bring out once I got myself set and once I was comfortable and once the scoring was there to be done. And when guys were missing, I just felt like I was always capitalizing. But then I always, I guess, came back to my basics and my good fundamentals of when they're bowling good balls, I'm happy to be not scoring. Like I'm just leaving them, patting them back. I don't need to score off every ball. I don't need to be greedy just because I'm on this big score. Like we're going bigger. And I remember like I got myself to 200 that night. And like I was obviously very, very chuffed about it. And then I remember I got a message from Chris Hartley, who was on the selection panel at the time. And he's gone, well done, mate. Now make it 300 tomorrow. And like that, I kind of paused for a second in the midst of like my personal celebration. I was like, actually, he's right. Like we lead by 200. Like we have a chance to bat for a two session tomorrow and then try and bowl them out in day four. Like I still have so much batting to do and so much scoring I'm capable of having. And then it was a proper just big greedy moment where I was like, I came back the next day and I was in absolutely no hurry. Like the first half an hour, I just spent reapplying myself and getting restarted again. And then I started opening the shackles up a little bit again. But I just never at any moment felt like I tried to force anything. It felt natural. It felt trained. And I just felt like I was making these really clear mental decisions that were just allowing me to get the best out of my batting.
I think it's very fascinating that even though you scored your 200 and obviously would have been helped by getting a message from Chris Hartley that that allowed you to fixate on, firstly making you stay hungry, but on top of that, kind of have a clear goal. So once you sort of realize, like sometimes you get to a big milestone and it's like, yeah, you've sort of achieved because everyone wants to score 100. Once you get there, it's like that motivation to go even further might diminish as a result
Yeah.
for many cricketers. So it's kind of finding that reason as to why you need to score even more. Is why you see players like I don't know Jay Swell that scores like big, like yeah, they might get out for a duck or less than 10 runs, but then when they're set they really make it
They
count.
just keep going. But I also think like that's like I think that shows like the not selfish side of the game, but the personal side of the game, right? Because everybody wants to get 100, right? But like in long format cricket, like getting to 100 and getting out is a huge waste. So if you're allowing your personal emotion to then blind you to the fact that you've actually still got more work to do and you just get caught up in your own celebration and end up getting out shortly after, like, yes, obviously you've scored a great 100, but if none of your team around you have managed to come with you, like your team's still in the hole. But like if you get yourself to 130 or 140, then all of a sudden now like you're really, really contributing to getting a big score. And then all of a sudden, like it doesn't matter who else has scored runs in your innings, you're probably still making 270, 280, 300. And if someone has come with you, then you're staring down the barrel of 400, 450.
I mean, yeah, like I think it sort of reminds me sometimes I think about it. as because obviously cricket can suck sometimes. Like you can get a beautiful ball early in your innings that can dismiss you, even dismiss the best of batsmen. And so when you're really set and you feel like your rest of the team didn't contribute, it's not like you should see it as, oh look, I did the most of the leg work here to make most of the team totals. It's more like, my team unfortunately got out. I'm in this position. I need to really make it count
Yeah.
today as well. For the sake of my team. And then in another day, if things don't go your way, then someone else can stand up and have that same mindset. So I
Yeah.
guess it's a team sport like
Like
that. Yeah.
at the end of the day, scoring runs when you're on 100 is easier than scoring runs when you're on zero. So like it's like obviously it's a team game and like the individual accolades come inside it, but like if you're scoring hundreds and large hundreds that are contributing to wins and more wins, then that's a more fulfilling feeling than just scoring hundreds on your own personal accolade and like it not correlating to team success. That's
What
that's
are the
just where I
key? Sorry, just wanted to ask, like, what are the key aspects do you feel that is important for someone to score those big hundreds? Like, what sort of things should they do in the process in order to make them achieve that? I know I definitely need it for my own sort of cricket. I get like quick 60s, 70s, I think, and 80s, but not like I don't unfortunately get to those kind of big hundreds. So, what sort of advice or what's important for someone to really, instill into the game to allow for those big hundreds to happen?
Well, I think that's all part of the mental game, right? Is like so. Obviously, I talk about my mental battle, getting from from zero to my first 30 or 40 balls, and getting myself set. And then there's also the mental side of how much self control and discipline do you have when batting is at its easiest? Because that's when you start making bad decisions because you end up thinking that you can do more than you actually can. Like you'll play one too many big shots or take one too many risks and you get yourself out. And being able to show that control and rein in that feeling and that emotion when you're running high and you're scoring runs and being able to stick to that plan is then what converts those 60s and 70s into hundreds. And then once you get to that 100 to that 150, 170, 200.
That's really interesting because that reminds me. I watched something one time where Adam Gilchrist was like, he focused more when he was scoring, when he was on a big score, because, as you mentioned, like those are the times when it's easiest to bat. So you have to really make it count, and as a result, he's focusing even more in a time where obviously batting is easier. And another point, it reminded me of. I was watching an interview of what's his name, Rian Parag. He's played for India as well, but he plays in the IPL. He was saying that he was observing the likes of Kohli, and he was saying like what he took from them is that even when, like for example, they've hit a few sixes or a few boundaries, and you have that adrenaline rush and the crowd's going crazy, they still have that ability to control their emotions, and even though everything's telling them to go for another big one, they sort of just block it out or kind of play a dot or play a single, even though the emotions might be telling them something else. So it's that kind of ability to control your emotions is seems like it's a sort of similar theme from many successful cricketers as well.
Yeah. I think Cole is always a great example of it, right? Because like, I look at his career as he's grown as a cricketer, and is obviously one of the greats of Indian cricket and Test cricket in general, and also his ability in white ball. So like obviously he was young, he was a bit more hot headed when he was younger, got himself into a few verbal stoushes, and obviously he had the talent to back it up. But I feel like as he got older and refined his ability to control his emotions better in those moments, it took his game to another level. And then even his white ball record, obviously like known as one of the greatest chasers in one day cricket and T20 cricket of all time. Um,
Very cute cat.
um, so yeah, like obviously being able to control that emotion and like you can obviously see that it's pent up and then all of a sudden like once the chase is complete, like he goes absolutely nuts. And you know that he's been like keeping that in for so long while that chase has been running and that adrenaline has been running high and he's kept on top of it and now he's just all going to release it once it's done because he can because the job is done now so you can celebrate.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely important to sort of see what the greats of the game are doing and try to take that on board, especially when it comes to controlling emotions. And that same season, after you scored that 345, you made your debut for Queensland, playing with the likes of Renshaw, Kawaja, Labuschagne, and you also scored, I think, in your debut match, 53 of 167. And so walk us through that experience. Obviously, you're playing in for your state. You're playing alongside players that played for Australia. I'm sure that you would have mixed with them prior, obviously, and maybe played games with them before. And I think Labuschagne, you actually played with him years before as well in like younger tournaments. If
Yeah,
that's
I
true.
definitely like he was coming out of the development system as I came into it as a youngin. I hadn't had a lot to do with most of them at the time, and like obviously I had interactions with them and played cricket with and against them, but never truly had the chance to sit down and talk cricket to them, especially since most like they'd all risen to the stardom that they did at the time, where they were all test capped, multiple like test hundreds, shield records off the charts. So then I guess like at that point I would sit there, I would ask questions and I would just listen. And I would like try to absorb as much of this information in as possible. And I think what was great for me at the time was that they understood how I wanted to bat and they would give me these answers to these questions that I want. And then they would be like, right, just because I'm doing it this way, don't feel like you have to copy that. Like you got to do what works for you. Like that's your game. And like these guys are just feeding me information and basically saying, pick what you need out of this. Like you don't have to copy everything. I'm not the gospel. It's not the batting Bible. Like you need to understand that it's completely personal. It's an all individual thing. It's up to you. You're the guy that has to go out there and score the runs. So you need to do what's best for you. And then I guess having so many different styles of batter to tap into, and I could be like, okay, well, I want to know about that from him. I want to know about that from him, and that allowed me to, I feel like, develop my not only technique but also my game IQ and my game awareness as well.
And before your debut, were you nervous? Because on your debut, you scored 53. So what was happening? What was going through your mind before you went to bat?
Yeah, massively nervous. It was actually the first time that I hadn't opened in years. So I debuted. So poor Sam Hazlitt broke a finger like the 2 days before the game. I wasn't originally selected, got called into the 12 as a replacement. And they're like, yeah, you're going to bat six for us. So I had to sit there and twiddle my thumbs for a while. And I was like, I haven't done this in so long. Like, I've actually got to figure out a way to not sit here and just burn up all this energy just by being nervous. So I don't even remember half of it because I didn't watch the first probably hour of batting that we had just because that wasn't what I needed. I wanted to feel as close to opening as possible. So I padded up late, would walk out, eyes the wicket. Okay, now I'm going to go out. Now I feel like I've somewhat recreated opening the batting again. Um, and then I guess I was probably too much in awe to be nervous. Like I walked out into this huge Gabba stadium that was obviously very empty, but like 40,000 seats around you. Like I'd listen to the sound of the cricket ball like echo off the seats when guys would absolutely crunch one. Like there was all these names that I'd grown up watching on TV, like Tom Cooper, Ferguson, like guys that I'd watched and idolized on TV, let alone the teammates that I had. Um, and I didn't almost just didn't have time to be overall because I was like, right now I'm batting, I got to focus. And I was probably fortunate enough that I got off the mark first ball, inside edge to fine leg for one off Nick Winter. And then that kind of quelled the nerves of getting a duck on debut. And then it was just like, right now I've got to actually focus and ready up because the team needs me to do a role here. So like, it's time to dig in.
And it's really interesting because you said that you have it was the first time in a long time where you weren't opening. So what I think you did, which is really good insight, is you sort of adjusted to the situation, try to mimic the situation in a way where you are sort of opening or sort of telling your brain that you will be opening. So it's a bit, close to home or more comfortable for you. And then on top of that, I assume that at that time you would have had access to that sports psychologist that would have helped you kind of mitigate those nerves that you might have been experiencing on debut as well.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not ashamed to say that. Like, obviously, it's in the modern game, it's more accepted and spoken about now about going to sports psych and getting help in that regard. the stigma's changed from a long time ago, where 10, 20 years, it was still very much like a negative thing. But yes, like they're so full of, I guess, information and knowledge, and they're all very different. So they all bring a different perspective and aspect to these things. So sometimes you might not gel with one sports psych. They might not be able to help you in the way that you need. You go see someone else, and then all of a sudden you click with them, and it's like, right, okay, we're on the same page here about how we're dealing with this. And then you'll start leaning into them more heavily.
And not too long after, you scored your debut 100, 115 off 308 against Western Australia. Seems like it was in your second match as well. So, how was that experience? Did you obviously feel a lot less nerves as opposed to your debut and go about your business? At that time, you were opening as well, from what I recall as well.
Yeah, I did open for that game. So like my first two Shield games and my one day debut came about as a result of just misfortune for others and fortune for me. So Hazlitt broke a finger for my Shield debut. Then Matt Renshaw got food poisoning for my one day debut, and then I was left out of the Shield 12 because Jack Watermouth had come back to bat six and bowl as the all-rounder. So then I was displaced from batting six. And then Renshaw still hadn't recovered from his food poisoning at the time. So I then got to open. And it was just a case of like, right, like at the end of the day, at full strength, I'm still not getting selected. I need to make the most of this opportunity for myself. But also, I don't want to look at it from a selfish perspective. So basically, it was just a case of if I'm contributing to us performing well and winning games, then I feel like I'm ticking that box. So I didn't want to focus upon the individual accolade itself, but I wanted to feel like I was individually contributing, and then that would then bring on personal success.
I think that definitely would help away from building that pressure more on yourself. Especially when you're describing a situation where obviously it's not easy to get into the Queensland team at full strength, so you sort of have to try to make sense, make the most of the situation as well. And on top of that, like the following, I mean, 2 years, so in the summer of 2021 and 2022, season before, you'd won the Shield final beating New South Wales, which is obviously a huge moment there. And then in that season of 2021 to 2022, you got to play for Australia A against England Lions, and you made 119 of 254 balls. So there was a lot happening that season, and you're obviously playing with many Australian players as well. So what was that experience like? Like, did you feel that you had to mentally be able to mentally approach that game when you played for Australia A differently as opposed to your previous Shield game? So what was your approach there?
Yeah. I guess like when you always go up to the next level, like it's always like that question of, right, is my game going to stand up to the next level? Like where it hasn't been tested yet. And obviously like it sounds stupid to say, but at the next level, they're just the best cricketers out of the previous one. So like you're just picking the best of what's there and putting it into one thing. So you've realistically already done it against one of them. Now you just got to do it against three or four of them at once. So like I was so nervous about it going into the game, and I remember we batted first. Pitch was a bit juicy, and like I was facing these guys, and I was like, this doesn't actually feel that different from first class cricket. Like I didn't feel like I was out of my depth at all. Like they were obviously very good. I'm not saying that in any way, but I was like, I feel comfortable. I feel like I'm ready for this. I feel like my game is up to this. And that just then kind of alleviated any mental questions I had about myself. And then I just was like, right, like I'm playing for Australia. I need to like enjoy this while I can. I want to be out here for as long as possible. And I only got 28 in the first innings, but getting through that first session and into the second session and batting for 100 balls gave me the confidence that I needed when I walked out in the second innings to go, right, I'm good enough to do this. This thing's flattened out. We're going to try and build a monster lead here before we bowl them out. Like, let's get to work. And just had an absolute blast batting with some of the biggest names in Australian cricket for a day.
Yeah, and obviously you overcame that self doubt initially, which how you described. How do you recommend anyone? Like, what's your sort of process when it comes to overcoming that self doubt in any other situation you come across?
I think it's just self-belief, right? Like, obviously, in professional sport, you need to have a certain level of, I'll say, arrogance slash confidence that you believe in yourself enough that you can compete at any level. Because if you don't have that, then you're never going to do it. So, but then it's also understanding about how much confidence is too much, and that leads to arrogance, and then you're almost too far the other way, where you're like mentally inhibiting yourself because you think you're too far ahead. So it's just about finding that nice balance where, like, I have the confidence to believe I can perform, but also I know where my game is at. I know exactly what my abilities are, and I know what I can do. That was just how it always was for me, feeling like. And then when I strayed either too not enough confidence or too much confidence, then I felt like my game paid the price.
I know we've got 5 minutes to wrap up the podcast, so thank you so much for your time. So just to ask a few questions before I let you go, when it comes to like, for example, the mental side and working on how to like overcome and have that self belief that you're describing, or that confidence that you've described, would you attribute it to like nature or nurture? Because sometimes it's really hard to just have it. Does that make sense, to have
Yeah.
that confidence and that arrogance that you're talking about?
I think for me, it was about putting in the hard work. Like, I know that if I prepared well and like I had done the work, that I would go out there and execute upon what I practiced before. So, like, as long as I had that foundation to build on and then go out in the game, and I was like, right, all I've got to do is just recreate what I was doing in the nets, because I'm training how I want to play. So I'm not having to overly complicate it or think about it. I've just got to do it again. And like, I've always kind of trained how I played in terms of game plans and whatnot, so that it becomes easier to transition out of the nets into the center wicket, where obviously game environment tests you a lot more. Um, so that's just personally where it's come from for me, as someone, I guess, like, growing up, I didn't have that much confidence in myself when I was younger. So that was how I found a way to then instill that in myself.
And I might ask two, three quick questions. And so you've obviously played against some world class bowlers in Shield cricket. Who's been the most challenging to face, and why? And on top of that, which batsmen have you watched personally that you've played against, or in your own team, where you thought like, wow, like this is actually like one of the best batsmen I've seen in my life?
Yeah. Okay. First question, bowling. When during the COVID years, 2021 and 22, when Nathan Lyon came back and played Shield cricket, that is the biggest working over I've received from a spinner ever. Just felt like he wasn't going to miss a spot, and he was like turn and bounce, getting over the ball, and I was like, I actually don't know how I'm scoring off this. So that was, and then in terms of quicks in first class cricket, both Trent Copeland and Jackson Bird are some of the toughest guys to face, in terms of they just hit an area, they can swing and nip the ball both ways, and they're just constantly challenging both edges, and their bumpers are good enough that if you're just going to comfortably plant on the front foot, they can challenge your face. So they work me over. And then in terms of just raw pace, I think there's four: Lance Morris, Mitchell Stark, Mark Wood, and Riley Meredith, who are all like the four guys that I faced going, oh, that, yeah, this is quick. Like, I was like being rushed for time even at that point in my career, where I felt like my game was in a really good place.
And in terms of batsmen, the best batsman you feel you've watched or seen?
I mean, obviously, I've had a many a prime viewing of Marnus Labuschagne when he was plundering Shield runs. Like, at the other end, watching him bat was just art at one point. That year that we won the Shield final, like, some of the innings that he pulled out, and especially the one in the Shield final where he made 190 in a game where no one else got more than 50. Like, it was just, he was playing a different game to the rest of us. That's probably the best live batting I've ever seen in my life, because, yeah, every borders felt like it was going for four. Every plan that New South Wales tried, he had an answer to. And there was probably some plans they didn't even try that he probably had an answer to. He was that prepared. And I just felt like he was never going to get out, and he was just had this blank check in front of him on this tough and challenging wicket, going, right, I'm writing my own number here today. Like, I dictate the score that I get.
And last question to wrap up the podcast. Like as you mentioned, you played alongside Labuschagne and Khawaja, many others as well. From these sort of big plays in Australian cricket, what's been the biggest learnings you've taken from them, or any advice that they've given to you that's helped you and shaped you?
Probably more so just seeing them, like, because obviously we all see the success and their personalities on the field, but I guess getting to know them off the field and knowing that they weren't that much different, like in terms of their nerves and managing their performance and whatnot. And I was like, right, these guys average 50 in Test cricket, and they're doing like similar things to me to help them aid their game and help perform. Like that kind of gave me the, not the courage or the confidence, but like the going, yeah, okay, like I need to keep getting better at this, because it doesn't matter how good I am, it's never going to go away.
Yeah.
And you're going to need to keep improving on the mental game, because at the end of the day, cricket is like 70% mental, 30% skill. Like you can have all the talent and the technique in the world, but if you don't have the game IQ and the game awareness to apply it, it doesn't really matter. It's not going to carry you as far as it should.
Thank you for sharing all those thoughts, and I'd love to do another podcast in the future. I know we're run a bit out of time, but would love to explore more and unpack more of the mental side in the future as well. So thank you so much for coming on the show, and for the listeners, feel free to check out our content. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iTunes as well. So check us out there. Give us a 5-star rating. Share with your friends and family. Follow us on Instagram and stuff. So we do clips and all that sort of stuff too. So till then, take care. Peace out.